accomplices gave him money, bought him a car, and they would recruit young victims to come to the house. And the sickness of this scheme, when these young boys would disappear, initially he told his accomplices, oh yeah, I sent him off to California as part of some pornography ring. And these 17, 18-year-old accomplices just went along with it. And the 36 months that this went on in Houston, Texas, there were a number of parents knocking the door in at the Houston Police Department. And being a runaway wasn't a crime at the time. And the local law enforcement was overwhelmed and basically said, hey, we can't do anything about it. Well, they could have done more. So said the voters. They got rid of some of those law enforcement officers. They got rid of some city administration after that, because it turns out that with just a little bit more looking, that could have happened. But, again, this is in the days where, right, there was no sex offender registration. There was no ability to keep tabs on your kids. You literally could have a son hitchhike from Houston to Austin to go to college, and you might not hear from that person. But what was really sick about the Candyman is that he would often make his victims write a postcard that they were okay and put it in the mail. And it's heartbreaking. I remember growing up on hearing about this, because it had only been a few years since the conviction when I was a young kid in Houston, Texas, learning about this. It had only been a few years since some of the bodies were recovered out at Lake Sam Rayburn and some other shallow graves, a boathouse. 17 young boys and children were found up there, and a few more. I think the last body was recovered in 1983. And those are just the known victims, right? I think there's 23 known victims, but there's other victims that predate the accomplices of Mr. Carl, the Candyman, and there's no telling how many other victims there are. At some point, one of the accomplices turned the weapon on Mr. Carl and shot him dead, and then confessed to the police, and that's what brought an end to this. But the sickness of it, the sadness of it, and the loss of human life is tragic. And we're talking about it because it was in the newspaper the other day. It's still important, and it's just something that no matter how many times we dive into the criminal mind, we just can't understand it, but we've got to be vigilant about it. Anyway, more from the studio on True Crime coming up.